as we went down the path of leaving NOBULL and starting something completely new from scratch with our own money and, with our own risk and all of those sorts of things, all of those feelings were super clear to me, which was, yes, we have to make amazing, beautiful, great, timeless, high-performing product. But assuming we can do that, which is obviously a really big assumption as a startup, but if assume for a minute we can do that, how will we win? And to me, winning is having a really powerful, positive impact on people. And to do that, you have to be interesting and differentiated and have deep roots.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to ALLSMITH, where we dive deep into the stories of visionaries, leaders, and changemakers who inspire us to rethink what's possible. Today, I'm incredibly thrilled to welcome Todd Meleney, a true force in the world of brand building and leadership. As the former Chief Marketing Officer of NOBULL, Todd played a pivotal role in creating a brand that redefined athletic performance and community. Now, as a founder and CEO, he's continuing to lead with passion, purpose, and an unwavering commitment to doing what makes him come alive. In this episode, Todd and I will explore his journey as a leader and visionary, his approach to building impactful communities, managing teams with heart, and creating brands that resonate deeply. We'll talk about the lessons he's learned along the way, the aspirations that fuel his drive, and how he continues to live with intention and purpose. Get ready to be inspired by Todd's insights on leadership, creativity, and the power of doing what lights your soul on fire. Todd, welcome to ALLSMITH, man.
Thank you, Bryce. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to connect with you. Before we explore a bunch of your story, this haircut, man, is looking good. They gave you a nice little taper and a nice transition into the top. This is one of the better ones I've seen. It looks good.
Thank you very much. It's cold January in New England, so anything I can do to feel good, look good, play good is what I'm about.
Dang, pulling from Deion Sanders himself.
I didn't know that was his quote, actually.
Yeah, he said something back in the day. I think it was when he was in his swaggy stage with the Dallas Cowboys, and he was returning punt after punt to the end zone, and he was wearing the bandana, and he was all about look good, feel good, play good. And I was like, okay, man, okay, I like that.
I like it. Well, he's relevant again with what he's doing in Colorado.
For sure, man. What are your thoughts on that? Like, you're such a sports guy, and you zoom out and you kind of observe kind of what's going on within basketball, football, baseball, obviously CrossFit. What are your thoughts on kind of just how sport transitions or relates rather to the process of brand building and relevance and trying to like land on people's radar?
What a good question. I mean, with Deion, he's the epitome of culturally relevant, cross-generational in such a way that I have no idea how good of a football coach he is from an X's and O's perspective. But he clearly is a great leader of people and has maintained cultural relevance in such a way that inspires confidence. And you see that through his players, like they love him, and his personality oozes out of everything that they do on the field and off the field. And that's pretty rare, and that comes from he knows who he is and he doesn't care what anybody thinks about that. And people aspire to feel that certain way. And, that translates to momentum in all things. And, I think there's a lot of examples of it, but Deion Sanders is one of the legends.
For sure, man. And some people criticize him for his showmanship or for whatever he decides to post. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And there was something that was shared recently around one of his seniors that just didn't have a father or his father was out of the picture, and Dion walked with him on senior day. And with you being a father now and knowing what that feels like to co-pilot somebody's journey and be that leadership figure for somebody, not just personally in your family dynamic, but also from a business standpoint, what does that kind of mean for you, just to kind of observe that and think about how that translates to brand building and leadership?
Well, I didn't know that story. That's cool and not surprising to me. Um, as it relates to brand building with Dion, I don't know if you would remember this, but I think it was last season or the season before, he was wearing Blenders
Hmm.
sunglasses,
I think they sold
and
like
they did
4
like,
million in one day.
yeah, 4 million in one day, and that's the power of cultural relevance,
Yep.
right? And um, for me in my life, yeah, I have a toddler now, and most of what the last 2 years plus have been, really 3 years, have been reorganizing my life to balance being able to be the father and family person I want to be and be the entrepreneur and, kind of high achiever that I aspire to be in my professional life.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to sacrifice either of those things, and for good reason. Like my family, my wife, my daughter are the single most important thing to me in the world. And my professional life is something that provides for them. But it also, you know, is what makes me come alive and feel like myself and feel energized and motivated and competitive. And um, being able to have those two things both be optimized is how I feel most like myself.
Hmm.
Um, and it gives each one of them more meaning, right?
Yeah.
Like professionally, I'm more focused and motivated than ever because I can see the implications of that work and how it can impact my loved ones. And then for, home life, it requires a level of segregation to be able to be present in the moments that I have to be present in, right?
Hmm.
Like, from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. when my daughter gets home from daycare and when she goes to sleep, like I'm not going to be on a call. I can't be because I have to be and choose to be present then.
Hmm.
And it's only a few hours out of the day, but they're really important to me. And I can still achieve all the things that I want to achieve that day if I haven't gotten to them between 8 p.m. and 9:30. And that's not every day, right? I still travel and I have balance and, I need to juggle a lot of different things, but they fuel each other in a super complementary way. Um, and the way I've described it to, people who are starting a family or, ask how do you do both, it's they're really very different muscles. So like as tired as you may be from a work day and all of the responsibility, stress and pressure that come with that, when you then go and sit down on the floor and are building blocks with a toddler, like you're re-stimulated in a completely different way that is impossible to understand unless you're doing it, right?
Hmm.
And it's in those moments where traditionally, or what I would have expected would be like, oh, I don't think I could sit there and concentrate on building blocks because I've got these emails to reply to and, this, that, and the other thing to do. But when you become comfortable and present with the fact that the most important thing that you can do is build those blocks, you really liberate yourself from what the other things, feel like. And then vice versa, it's the other way around too.
Hmm.
Um,
I love the way you
so that's,
describe that. Like the cool part about that is like presence seemingly is one of the hardest things you can do. Some people
mm,
say time is our highest form of currency, but I actually think it's attention or focus, maybe for a better word. And in this particular instance, I also think there's incredible transferable skills for someone that's a visionary and as innovative, and you're trying to spark leadership, and there's idea conversations and execution that follows. I'm sure Nora teaches you a lot of things and opens your mind capsule to be like, oh, wow, I actually didn't see things that way. Because as an adult, we get a little bit calloused or stuck in our boundaries or brainwashed based on societal norms or how things have always been. You probably learn a ton within those sauna therapy sessions that you execute consistently within that hot box and that think tank. It's probably, those longer runs when you're processing your thoughts and, tinkering with your wife and bouncing ideas back and forth. But more importantly, man, that childlike mindset, children don't have any pre-existing information that infiltrates them or depreciates or fogs their lenses. They're just all gas, no brakes. Here's what we're going to do. And there's something to that that's so powerful and so special. And I think it's really cool that you notice those things.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because I think about a lot of that in how we process decisions as a business and what we do and how we approach them. And when you have children, you're raising them to contribute to society in a certain way. Like, ideally it's a way that is positive and contributing and, all sorts of those things. And you're instilling life lessons, right? And like some of them are the simplest things, like the pizza's too hot, don't eat it yet, or you're going to burn your mouth. And they burn their mouth, and that's a life lesson, right? And you just sit there and you're like, well, that's not going to happen again, and there's like so many simple things like that where you get to reconnect with your own childhood and all the lessons that you experienced, and then help you reflect on, am I showing up and contributing the way I'm teaching my children to contribute, right? And that just sharpens and refines your own worldview and approach to the conflicts that you do face as an adult or as a professional. And it's super humbling, but really cool, just kind of like full circle type of experience.
No, totally, man. It's so fascinating. When I think about you, I don't only think about like the calm demeanor at which you navigate conflict resolution or really full schedule, but something that comes to mind is the famous quote of, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. And when I've connected with you in our brief moments at CrossFit events or just in passing, not only do you yourself like diffuse, or maybe to echo some of the people within the CrossFit space, there's a ripple effect from you. And you do create a feeling of playfulness. And I think play is the highest form of learning. But even the last time I was at the CrossFit Games and I saw your hand in Yeti and the spatial awareness as to how you set that up, the color scheme being earth tones, a little bit of metals, a little bit of concrete, like you're really thinking through, or at least from my lens, is like, what is the experience? What's going to happen from the beginning of somebody walking into a booth to their experience within to the exit strategy? What's the detail orientation? What's the generalized flow? What are some predetermined questions that may float to the surface for a consumer? What I'm getting to there is like, how do you process all of that? That's a busy mind. But then everybody's sitting on the couch with a great idea. How do you then execute it and put it to life?
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I would say, like, on paper, my job description historically has been connected to marketing. And, people are very quick to credit marketing as a reason a brand is successful, right? Like, oh, I love the company, their marketing is so good. And I never felt like I was a good marketer, which is funny, right? But it's because I was mostly just thinking about how do we want people to feel when they're connected to our brand. And a feeling is created by like a comprehensive experience that they're having, right? And what you're talking about is like physical in-person, experiential marketing. But that's broader than marketing. That's product, that's customer service, that's look and feel of the materials that you're using. That's how long did they wait in line to buy whatever it is that they were buying. That's, whatever surprise and delight type of things that you can do. We call those Easter eggs, that people find and creates a moment of joy and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
It all contributes to, their experience with the brand and how they feel after they left the brand. Mm-hmm. And the reason that's so important is because growth and momentum and scalability of building businesses, and we've seen this in business over the last 3 years, is like, you can't buy your way to success. Like, very rarely do these timeless, iconic brands maintain if they're buying their way to it. And the most efficient and scalable way to grow is from word of mouth. And people share their experiences when it's really meaningful to them. So if you can bring that stuff into as many touch points as you possibly can, then you're increasing the probability that they're going to have an awesome experience and share it with somebody. And then you get the opportunity to try to create that same experience for the next person. And I think that applies personally with how you show up and how you carry yourself and how you treat people in person. And, all of the different moments of which a brand, experiences or interacts with a customer. And, we talk about designing every moment. That's
cool.
What we've done in the past in some of these big product launches, or, building, retail spaces at the CrossFit Games or the NFL Combine or things like that. It's how do we design every single moment, because you don't know which moment is going to connect with which person. But if you've designed them all in such a way that is impactful, there's a really high probability that people are going to come out of there feeling a certain way. Mm-hmm. And if you've created that feeling, you've then equipped them with, a level of recall that they can then share with the people around them. Mm-hmm. And then you start to create the ripple effect, which you described as a way for businesses to grow or movements to happen or, anything of that in that nature.
Mm-hmm. Where did this thought ideation kind of come from for you? Because you have a background in sports marketing. You were obviously the CMO of NOBULL for a very long time. You also do what I call just pay the fuck attention. You observe a lot of different arenas and what's going on, and they're just inventory for your psychological toolbox. But was there a moment like in your childhood or from your upbringing or in your sports background where you were just kind of like, whoa, like you had this epiphany moment of like, oh wow, the actual tangible secret sauce is how you feel. We are emotional creatures. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I'd love to have the X's and O's and all the data analytics to support certain marketing efforts. But at the end of the day, like if people feel connected in a tribal culture and they feel like something aligns with their value system, we're going to buy. Like, was there a moment for you that kind of landed on your radar?
Great question. I don't know that there was a real specific one incident that galvanized that feeling. Actually, I would say maybe there was, but it came much later in my, kind of journey. But a lot of it to me came from the fact that I didn't want to go work some traditional job ever. Like the idea of having to work for the rest of my life sounded like hell.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to pursue things that would, you know, accelerate the path through that. And that meant chasing like really big, ambitious goals because I was motivated by solving like long-term complex problems and not wanting to be in stuffy corporate environments that were going to rerun the same playbook as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I was attracted to being on small teams of people where you really could influence what that experience was for you and the level of success that, the team would have. And in that, we created like small, high performing groups of people that love to do the same things together. And then, like, just naturally kind of connected with the people that we were trying to serve through our products or whatever. And then that kind of built on itself over time and accelerated beyond what you could have done had you taken the very traditional approach to it. And then once you start to have those wins, you start to look at it like, oh, like, well, this is coming from the thought process of let's try to look at this differently and serve this audience in a way that we would want to be served, right? Because we don't want that traditional stuffy BS either. And then, build on top of that in a way that creates, momentum. And that's where non-linear growth can occur, both professionally, meaning as an individual in your career, or for business results, right? And that's where traditional marketing is just creating a result. It's trying to drive behavior, but brand is trying to create a feeling.
Mm.
And in a traditional sense, if you're a kick-ass marketer, like one of the best in the world, if you're given $1, you should be able to create $3 out of that by buying customers. You know what I'm saying? And that creates a very linear, anticipated growth path that is safe.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to create non-linear growth, you need to do things differently. And that's where brand and momentum are the drivers of non-linear growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been the beneficiary of that in my own career, with, how I've developed and grown. And, some companies I've been a part of have been able to benefit from that too, NOBULL being one of them. And then many other companies that I wasn't a part of starting, but was able to advise or consult with, and has led me to this really clear vision of how I think timeless, iconic brands are created, and using, some of the tools and playbook to do that. And that comes from having a real impact of, being authentic and serving, whoever it is you're trying to serve, because you are that and you care about, maintaining your place within, that kind of broader ecosystem, if that makes sense.
No, it makes great sense. And there's so much to unpack there. When I think about Todd Meleney, I think peacefully disruptive. I think you understand the playbook, but it's like, okay, why is it that way? Let me play the game of the 5 whys. Let me explore the hows, the whats, and everything in between. And I heard you talk about it on your newest brand, which I definitely want to explore with you. But you've got Nike, you've got Reebok, you've got Adidas. It's a 1-word, 2-syllable title. And it's like, you went against the grain a little bit on that. You practice the art of disruption. It was like, okay, I don't think it has to be that. This has this tangible meaning to me, to our team, and potentially the future, and nobody else is doing this. So that famous Emerson quote, do not go where the path may lead, go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Fucking trailblazing is so cool, man. And it's just like, it requires a lot of courage, a lot of risk tolerance. And I'm sure behind the scenes, there's a reason why you're in the sauna just about every night, because you're peacefully manifesting while trying to, navigate the peaks and valleys of stress. And so it's like, how do you kind of trust within yourself to create this playbook, create buy-in from your team, but also manage the fact that like you can't really see what's next, and you're like sitting there with the machete trying to carve it.
Yeah. It's definitely stressful. And we don't have a clear roadmap. If we did, we probably wouldn't be attracted to going down it anyway.
Same.
Because that's what the nature of it is. But
Mm-hmm.
if I'm being blunt, like we learned a ton building NOBULL. And your last question was like, was there a moment where you galvanized your point of view on building a brand or how to do it? And I fell short of answering that question. But what I would say is there actually was a moment where that did happen. And it wasn't until 2022, but I was invited to participate in this brand marketing summit called The Gathering. And that event selected 10 brand honorees per year and gave them a platform to share how they had built whatever it was that they had built. And it was a major career milestone for me at the time, but I was wildly insecure about whether I belonged to be there. And the brands that had been honored there over the 10 years that this event has existed are Yeti, Levi's, Netflix, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Traeger, Spotify, on and on, the North Face, like true titans of industry, Jeep, like, brands that I've admired. And we were a startup that was 7 years old. And yes, we were doing hundreds of millions in sales, and I was leading marketing, and we were partnered with the biggest sports properties in the world and growing probably faster than any other company that was there. But like for me in my role and where I was in my career, it was so non-traditional that I wasn't sure that I belonged, because everything that we had done to get there was based on feel and intuition and knowing the customer and spending probably more time in the gym as a marketing leader than anybody else in the world, right? Like I lived there. Like I sought out gyms to go sit on the floor with my computer and work out of them because I could just see how people are interacted with each other all over the world. Mm-hmm. And that's how that's how I developed into the vision that we had for that brand. And when I went to this event in 2022 and heard from all of these other speakers who I'd never met, we were all speaking the exact same language. And it came at a time where that was really validating and impactful to me. And I left the event feeling like, okay, I do kind of know what the fuck I'm talking about, even though I never was really sure before.
You deserved a seat at the table for sure.
And then coming out of that, I was able to like really have a crystallized view of how I view building brands. And what I experienced in that was, hey, like, there's actually nothing proprietary. Like, it is truly about the feeling that you're creating and the value that you're offering. And I say that under the assumption that your product is great. Like, if your product is great and equal to your peers, brand and feeling and value and relationship is what creates choice. You know, and as we went down the path of leaving NOBULL and starting something completely new from scratch with our own money and, you know, with our own risk and all of those sorts of things, all of those feelings were super clear to me, which was, yes, we have to make amazing, beautiful, great, timeless, high-performing product. But assuming we can do that, which is obviously a really big assumption as a startup, but if assume for a minute we can do that, how will we win? And to me, winning is having a really powerful, positive impact on people. And to do that, you have to be interesting and differentiated and have deep roots. And one of the first steps to setting your roots is picking a name that has meaning. And that's why we selected While on Earth, because we were trying to create a feeling of reflection and recall and pause that could hopefully connect people not just with our product and our brand and our mission, but with themselves in such a way that will empower them beyond what we could possibly do as a, you know, consumer business.
How do you do the dance with, okay, you mentioned the financials, your own money, your risk, payroll, liability, legalities, setup of the S Corp or the LLC, trademarking, and then on top of that, be the visionary, be the one delivering, be the one that's inspiring leadership and creating a safe space for people to transition from probably their lucrative, safe career that they had prior to coming over to some of the brands that you're working with. And then simultaneously take these trips to feel the materials, understand the process of manufacturing, not just for apparel, but also for footwear, which has all kinds of, you know, questions and variables and things associated with it. Obviously, you're pulling over the toolbox and the landscape of experiences from NOBULL. But, I mean, Todd, that's a lot of moving parts. Like, you're one guy. How do you do it all, man?
Well, I don't do it all. We have an insane team. Really, it was, what does it take to be where we want to be 24 months from now? And that goes back to early in 2023, ironically, which we're coming up on 24 months from when we started this process. But I knew that I could not do it alone. And a lot of the things that we had done in the early days of NOBULL were really foundational to the success that came later. And that came from the early team members. And we weren't crystal clear that we were going to start a footwear and apparel brand. Like, that was the dream, and there was like hope and belief that we could do that better. But the path to doing that is really hard. It's really expensive, and it's really high risk. And it's really competitive. So we left, and it was Chris, Jed, and Alexis, who are my three best people from NOBULL across different departments of the business, who had a wealth of experience standing things up from nothing. So when you think about who do you want to have with you in the trenches of building something, you want people that are calloused and tough and don't have an ego and know that this shit's going to be really hard. And we're not going to have all the answers, but we're going to figure it out as a team. And we're going to make sure that you're made whole in this process, which is you're not being asked to take a haircut. You're not being asked to, walk away from this platform or career arc that you've started. In fact, this is the path to accelerating it. And here's how. But it's going to take 24 months and there's going to be some uncertainty along the way. And what that meant was starting a marketing agency first and being able to tap into the network that I had built over 10 years in the fitness industry at NOBULL and trying to apply the lessons and learnings that we had to help other businesses that were at earlier stage. So we started an agency. We started helping clients immediately. We had a half a dozen or so brands that we worked with over the course of a year on a retainer. And those were big scopes. We were doing deals with the NFL and we were doing deals with the CrossFit Games and athletes and entering new markets and creating content and, tapping into all of the skills and experience we had. And that kept the lights on. That paid salaries for our whole team, while in the background, we were processing and thinking through, can we pull off launching our own footwear and apparel brand? And
so freaking smart, man. I mean, I love the concept of take the leap. It's very similar. Like you and I had that conversation, I believe, at the 2022 CrossFit Games, maybe in 2023. And it's just like, it's very important that, yes, you have the vision for this BHAG, this big, hairy, audacious goal. But like you always talk about, like, you definitely need to maintain cash flow. You have to do the certain things that allow you to pay the bills. And I think it's important and responsible if you're going to bring a team on that, like, yes, there's uncertainty, but there needs to be a little bit of security. And the next spot that I want to kind of dance with you is I want to pull from the world of Simon Sinek a little bit. Big fan of some of the things that he communicates, and he always talks about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. How did you establish a foundational why when leaving NOBULL and kind of communicate that vision to a team that was kind of taking the leap for this long sought after goal, but maybe they couldn't see light at the end of the tunnel?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when I was the CMO of NOBULL, we had this incredible growth journey. And we started in the CrossFit space. We kind of took over the CrossFit space, became the title sponsor after Reebok, who is this, legacy billion-dollar company. And now NOBULL is like ascended to this role. And that was super exciting and exhilarating. And as we advanced on that path, we were all simultaneously trying to expand beyond CrossFit and how to expand the definition of training and be broader than the audience that we had started in, because it was such an intense, no excuses attitude that is polarizing, just like CrossFit is. Like, there's many, many people who are intimidated and have no interest in stepping into a CrossFit box, but would do Barry's Boot Camp or Orange Theory or any of these things that are so similar, right? And that was really freaking hard to do, was how can we maintain this core but grow beyond it and reach all of these people who are super intimidated by CrossFit and super intimidated by this really harsh no excuses type of brand. And
Mm-hmm.
that was my job, and as we stepped away from that in early 2023, it gave me some space to reflect on what had worked then, what hadn't worked, and then like what was happening with other brands all around us. And what I realized was a lot of these brands that had been born into a really singularly focused audience were struggling to expand beyond that. Right. And, NOBULL was one of them. Like, how do you get beyond just being a CrossFit brand? Um, you know, Gymshark and 10,000, how do they expand and be, more inclusive to other audiences? Allo is called Allo Yoga, on running, right? So they're targeted and launching into running, into yoga. And when you achieve a certain scale, you've saturated that market. And to continue to grow, you need to have, a broader pool or different pools of people to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew how hard that was to do. And we knew that we wanted to create a brand that had a much broader audience and appeal. And I also reflected upon many of the people that had supported me and NOBULL during that period. And I was kind of like, these people would never buy this brand if it weren't for me, right? Like when I looked back on it, right? I'm like, my wife doesn't do CrossFit. She would never be buying this product if it weren't for me. And then I, assessed that, and it was like so many people in my personal life who are really active and fit and healthy and aspire to be better were kind of the same way. And I was like, well, what would it mean to build something that could be really attractive to those that are in the gym hitting it really hard, but could also be really attractive to those who have a different approach to fitness? And that's where I started to become more familiar with what's happening in the wellness space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how much broader the definition of wellness is compared to the definition of training.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that a lot of my behaviors as a customer had evolved over 10 years, and maybe I wasn't hitting, heavy barbell workouts or, insane Metcons 5 days a week like I maybe was in 2016 or 2017. I'm still in the gym doing CrossFit, but I'm also walking more,
Mm-hmm.
or doing trail runs or running, or some days it may be just that I had time for sauna and ice bath because I'm, chasing my 2-year-old around the house and working full time.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked around and it was like, well, these type of things are incredibly helpful to me feeling how I want to feel as a person. And that's my definition of wellness, right? It's just balance and a holistic approach to being a high performer for the goals that I have as a professional, as a person. What if we created a brand that could do that for everybody, no matter what it is that they're chasing?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the brief. What do you name a brand that's intended to inspire people to reach their full potential?
Man, you're definitely speaking my language, and I think the famous question that's come up for me often over my subtle transition, where CrossFit is still a part of my life, but it's not all of it anymore, is, do you have fitness or does fitness have you? And I think the term training relates to that a little bit, in the sense of like, when you're training super hard, you may have great health biomarkers. You may be jacked with your shirt off. You may be able to lift a ton, have incredible gym capacity. But what's the life capacity? I was noticing personally, in my observation of the space, that like there was so much training going on that it was like, oh wow, now you are an absentee father. you're not great in business, you're too tired or you're too sore to navigate some of these other stresses. You're constantly worried about macros and management of inflammation. Psychologically, like you're thinking about one thing, and that's sport, that's fitness. But there's like, whoa, shift your lenses over here, and there's this whole other world of adventure and food and connection and brand building and storytelling and just indulging within the human experience, which at the end of the day, life should be enjoyed. There should be a little bit of suffering. There should be a little bit of pain. There should be enduring, of course. But there also should be the other side. There needs to be the light with the dark, the heavy with the light. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head. And I very much align with the things that you were saying. The coolest thing about what you're building is exactly that. Like, you're hitting the gym, but then you're grabbing a coffee for a meeting right after. And then you're heading home to take the dog for a walk. And then you're picking up your kid from school, spending some time with family. And then you're back in the office. And it's like, if you can have an apparel line where you're not a walking billboard, you feel a certain way, you feel empowered to look good, feel good, play good, to echo what we said previously. Now it comes full circle into this thing called the beautiful life. And I love the concept of wellness, like you said. I love the concept, to echo Carl Paoli, lifestyle design, I think is a really beautiful way to echo it as well. And I do think that is the future. You know, obviously there's sauna, there's ice, there's cold plunges, there's everything floating to the surface with RFK and peptides and Andrew Huberman with red light therapy and all those things. But it's like, whoa, you can have one brand or a collective of brands that have this same ideology, and it's not just married to one space, but it's all inclusive of whatever type of fitness you do. We've got your back. We're going to co-pilot your journey. It's not just about running or lifting or one specific modality.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And that's how I live my life, you know. And, you know, we started this with talking about being authentic to your audience and to yourself, and creating products that make you feel great and stand up to the needs that you have as that customer, and then building or designing the moments that inspire you to go do more of those things, right? And part of that for me has really been becoming more present with my central nervous system. And like, what are the things that are positive influences and what are the things that are negative influences? And generally speaking, fitness and movement is a positive, but it can also become a negative when it's too extreme, or too demanding, and then is creating stress for you in other ways. You know, and there's other contributors to that, right? Like work stress, family stress, whatever it may be, in
Food,
your
sleep,
own,
travel, all the things.
all of it. But for me, it just became around like rebalancing what are the things that I need to feel a certain way. And I think there are a lot of people that can relate to that, because most people are going through something, and having the tools to balance those things out is what continues you down the path that you're on of improvement. And that's, you know, kind of the journey we're all on.
Totally. I want to pivot the conversation a little bit. Obviously, the co-founders of your newest brand are CrossFitters, Matt Frazier and Brooke Wells. It's a brand that, you know, you are a huge part of, that you've embarked on for over a decade now. Huge grassroots, so many positive things associated with community within the CrossFit space. And you and I both know there's a lot of tension right now in that world. We've got maneuvering of leadership. We've got obviously the unfortunate death of Lazar Dukic. We've got tons of questions floating around. We've got Glassman potentially creating a fitness league. We've got the World Fitness Project with Will Morad and some of those guys. Really cool time, full of opportunity. A little bit of a volatile time within the space associated with the PFAA and the controversies there associated with Castro and Don Fall and all the things. And that's to try to just summarize and give a little bit of an encapsulation for people listening. What are your thoughts just kind of on the future of the sport? Is it a space that you think is going to kind of stick it out and figure it out? Or do you think we're going to see the uproot of other organizations kind of tinkering within the fitness space? And obviously I have to throw High Rocks in that conversation too. Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinneon Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinneon is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag, or even an overnighter. Kinneon's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinneon.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey.
Yeah, I would say we're definitely in a very chaotic time for competitive fitness. And in chaos, there is opportunity. And we're seeing that opportunity develop in a handful of ways. And I don't know which one of those is going to, be born or excel out of it, if any of them. But it's interesting to see the different approaches to it. And I'm excited for the World Fitness Project. And Will Morat's a friend of mine. He's somebody that I've gotten to know over the last 5 years. And I'll share this story. I think he would be okay with me sharing it. But this was 3 years ago, I think. We were hanging around after one of the semifinal events, which he had a great performance, qualified for the CrossFit Games, and small group of people were kind of hanging out and just kind of reminiscing on the weekend. And Will had very strong opinions about the experience that he had as an athlete and how that event was operated. And it wasn't critical, but he was, he had a clear point of view. And I remember saying to him at the time, okay, well, talk is cheap. So why don't you do something about it? I'm sick of hearing people bitch without any action, and he's a friend. So it was like tongue in cheek, right? Like we were discussing it. And I've reflected upon that 3 years later with the level of ambition and progress he's made towards standing up a completely new sports league, which is a monumental undertaking. And I think it's awesome. And I'm super proud of the progress that they've made thus far. And as an entrepreneur, anticipate some real meaningful bumps in the road, just like any journey. But it represents progress that I certainly welcome, because that level of friction in the space allows for growth and newness. And that's how a lot of the most successful sports leagues, whether that's the NBA or the NFL or others, they're constantly tinkering or evolving or changing.
Oh, yeah.
And we, should welcome that when it comes to competitive fitness.
Very well said. I don't have a ton of experience with Will Morad, but something that comes to mind is 2 years ago at the Ultimate Hawaiian Trail Run. Myself and Bickle popped over to Jackson's house, and Alex Kazan was there, Will Morad was there, Street Horner. But when you pause and you self-reflect and you kind of observe that group, we kind of all had different goals. And so like I was with Jackson kind of doing like an 8x4 back squat, kind of ascending. And then I ended up doing like a conditioning piece of like ski erg, toe bar, and burpee. Very linear, relatively safe stuff given my goals of, like you've said, look good, feel good, play good. My CrossFit career was kind of done at that point, and I just wanted to use fitness to connect with community and move my body and stay healthy. And then over here, you got like Street and Bickle doing like a nasty like rowing burpee workout that it's like Bickle's trying to play with his endurance goals and Street's trying to play with his endurance goals because they both were trying to like talk smack to each other and pursue, you know, the highest form of capacity. And then you've got Alex and Will that are like still training for the CrossFit Games. And they're going through their programming and chipping away at things, talking strategy of wall climbs and strength endurance and this, that, and the other. And we kind of had these different pairs of people, but we were all underneath the same roof. And it was so cool just to see like the formation of each of us kind of navigating our own headspace, but how that relates to the different brands that you're tinkering with and how it's like, wow, we can all coexist. We're all trying to better ourselves for our own unique paths that we're kind of carving within the world. And now to see him take all of that digestible information and try to translate it into something with action. And Jackson's such a cool dude. I've met him a few times and just like peaceful demeanor, really open to feedback, always trying his best to create, like you've described on our conversation today, just a really special experience. And I think just that combination of people, like it's a really cool thing. And it leads me to my next question. As you observe, I mean, you've spent so much time with O'Keefe. You've been out at Wadapalooza. You've obviously watched the games and then Dubai, Rogue, all the different things. If you were kind of in charge of leading CrossFit into this next era, what would kind of be your vision for the brand, or what advice would you give them and the community for the next, 5 to 10 years?
Great question. I mean, I think a level of professionalism for the athletes is necessary to allow for continuing to build on the foundation that exists when it was in a more formative state. And right now, it feels like it has plateaued and regressed in some areas, while still having athletes that are training to compete for world championship. And I think to be able to provide a beacon of inspiration and world-class sport for the rest of the fitness world to engage in, it needs to level up. And if that's
how would you define professionalism, though? Would that be monetary compensation? Would that be the safety issues that the PFAA is talking about? Or would you say, like, I mean, right now, just me personally, as somebody that was in the CrossFit space heavy for over a decade, when I watch the different competitions, I don't know who the athletes are now. They're amazing. Their feats, I have so much respect for their capabilities and capacity. But the same thing holds true for like the UFC. And they do a great job of storytelling behind the scenes when it's like, oh, Joe Schmo's getting ready to fight. I know nothing about him. But then they show a clip, how they overcame homelessness or whatever the challenge was, or injury to kind of get to that day. And I'm like, oh, I can root for that guy now. I have this like connection that I look him up on social media or like YouTube. And I'm like, oh, like that's my guy. Like I relate to him now. I feel like CrossFit's missing that storytelling component. Obviously, they're missing the safety component, which Brent Fikowski and Pat Vellner and all those guys are doing a great job kind of leading the way with the PFAA. But then there's the monetary component. It's like, how do you continue to train at such a high level unless there's some sort of passive income, a real estate endeavor, a wealthy spouse? Like, it's very not sustainable unless you're within the top 15 of the sport.
Yeah, and even that, I would say it's difficult for some. Uh,
Yeah.
to me, safety is table stakes. We shouldn't even have the event if we can't operate in a way that is safe for all. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
mean without risk, but I mean fundamentally safe, well resourced, and prepared for potential negative outcomes that can occur in pro sports. So that
Mm-hmm.
should happen, it needs to happen, and I hope that it does. Because without that, there is no economic path forward. And this state of sport, because it lacks traditional broadcast reach and the economic value that comes from sponsors and broadcast networks paying for that distribution, means that it's dependent upon ticket sales and partnerships to fund the existence of the events. And that is just the reality. And that was the case when Reebok was the title sponsor, when NOBULL was the title sponsor. They were leading the financial obligation to the event. And I say that knowingly, right? Because at NOBULL, we funded the prize purse for 3 years, which was $3 million a year. And that was only a small piece of the contribution that was being made. Without
Mm-hmm.
that, there is not the same trickle down effect that justifies investments into athletes or activation or general commercialization of a sports property. And what we're seeing now is the erosion of what had been built up until 2020 or so, and the segregation between all the athletes competing for one world championship at the CrossFit Games versus World Fitness Project versus transferring those skills to Ironman or High Rocks or UTMB or whatever else is out there and inspiring and offers, retail value or commercial value. And I don't know what the result will be, but I know that for the athletes to be able to survive in this space from a professional standpoint, they need partners. And the partners are attracted to being able to reach a broader audience through the spectatorship of the event. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's going to be possible with any of the properties that exist right now, whether it's the CrossFit Games or otherwise. I sure hope so.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the risk of the current state that we're in is, will any one of these be viable enough to create a platform that reaches enough people for brands to invest millions of dollars into marketing through it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the truth.
No, for sure. To put a period on this little bit of our conversation, I will say, being outside of the CrossFit space, personally, where I train or where I operate my business now, the word CrossFit is a bad word, unfortunately, because people that are not familiar with the history and all the beauty that CrossFit has, the first Google is, man dies at CrossFit Games. And it's sad, it's unfortunate, but I also do believe that at least in the current landscape, that word might need to upgrade and evolve, because it's coming with a stench that is very scary, unsafe, and intimidating to the community outside of CrossFit, which mitigates leads, mitigates community growth. And that's why, I can't speak for the East Coast, but out here we're seeing so much around the Yard, which is an up-and-coming franchise model. We're seeing Fit Stop. We're seeing different forms of fitness popping up that are group model, but they're kind of minimizing barbell and really expressive gymnastics to try to keep people a little bit safer, so it's a little bit more relatable and you can emulate it at the park. And so it is going to be interesting to kind of see where we go. I'm trying my best to put the most optimism into it because it does have so many values as well. I don't want to speak poorly of CrossFit by any means because it's done so much for me, my family, my life, and friends and communities around me that it's like, man, there's a lot of magic in there too. And I don't want to just highlight the bad and not the good. So it's important that we talk about both. The other thing I want to discuss with you is just you being such a leader, but within being a leader, like it's difficult to diffuse your inner vision and your inner magic without sometimes the help of people like Matt Frazier, Matt O'Keefe, and Brooke Wells, and the other people that you're connected with. And I think it's just such a beautiful partnership that you've created in the sense of like, well, those guys probably need some help with some structure. They might need some help with business salve, with language, but they have the inner experience. They're obviously very marketable. Their capacity and their abilities are off the charts. And so it almost seems like this like beautiful connection, and O'Keefe being like so easygoing, adventurous, but coming with his own version of just like personability and business knowledge and failure understandings. You guys have just created this real cool landscape. And then obviously you mentioned Alexis and Jed on the back scenes of like building something, just being really tough. What's that experience been like as a leader and visionary to kind of help bring up some of these guys' strengths, but then also take a back seat where they might be better than you at certain things?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And Matt, Frazier, Brooke, I've worked with these people for 10, 11, 12 years, and Frazier not directly, right? Like he was always a Nike athlete, but O'Keefe and I are great friends and have worked together in every intersection from, when he was representing athletes to Loud and Live and running Wadapalooza to HWPO and, my journey throughout that. So we've been through a lot professionally and personally. And Brooke, who's one of my best friends, and we kind of grew up together on that NOBULL journey. And as she was developing herself as a CrossFit athlete and a young professional, and I was building my career within the fitness space, there was so much shared experience that we've bonded through that as a group. And when we set out on building something new, there's so much value in trust that eliminates friction from the conversation because everybody's intentions are entirely pure. And in business, when you're a small team, you don't have time for that. Like you have to focus on the goal and mission that you have. And Matt and Brooke are two of the most successful, legendary athletes in the history of CrossFit. And that alone, full stop, right? Like so fortunate to have them a part of this purely from, how well known and trusted they are as ambassadors of that sport, but also as they evolve and continue to evolve in their life. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes their connection to Wow on Earth really unique is Matt's not competing anymore. He has evolved to juggle so many of the life challenges that everybody faces, because he has a family now and is, managing his company and, all of those sorts of things. And Brooke, while she is still competitive, is at a much more mature professional phase of her life to be able to reach people where they are too. And, we talked about the evolution of CrossFit in our own journeys there, and they have such broad reach globally that many of the people who are inspired by them have evolved also because they've been around for so long. Brooke's been competing for 11 years. Many people who may have been training one way 5, 6, 8 years ago are doing something totally different 8, 10 years later. but they're still inspired by Brooke because they've followed her story and all the things she's overcome, and who she's becoming as a person. And we can connect with those people just as much as we can connect with the people who are, still hammering it in the gym every day. And our brand is built for both. And that's the cool thing about it. And what I think makes it super special and will be special for years to come is, kind of timeless approach to fitness and movement. And Matt and Brooke and O'Keefe all live that and breathe that and bring things that I couldn't possibly bring, right? Like the skills that I have and the vision that I have for the business is great, but it's nothing without execution and people knowing about it, right? And we all bring something different to the table. And I'm a big believer that each person should spend their time on the things that only they can do, only that they can contribute to the whole. Because what, value is it for me to spend, twice as much effort on something that I'm not nearly as good as someone else on the team, right? So with Brooke, she's competing and she's got the biggest competition schedule of her career coming up this year, which on one hand, it's like, oh, well, she's not going to be in the day-to-day of the business as much as maybe she would have otherwise. But what she's actually doing is bringing awareness and audience in ways that only she can do. There's only so many people that have the level of reach and, fan base that they do. So let's lean into who they are, where they are in their journeys, and use that to help connect with people no matter where they are, right? And that speaks to, well, you have CrossFit athletes on the founding team, but you're building something much broader than that. And I think they both do an amazing job at living up to it.
That's cool, man. Highlighting those strengths, dude. As we wrap things up, I want to touch on one final thing, and that's, it's really easy to talk about all the accolades, but when you transition into something new, there's that lonely chapter where you're grieving what was, leaving the team at NOBULL, or in my case, leaving what I knew at Invictus, jumping into something new. And it's so exciting. It's nerve-wracking. There's high risk. There's uncertainty. You're trying to paint the picture. You're trying to create buy-in. There's so many questions. How have you kind of managed yourself in that lonely chapter of letting go of what was to create space for what could be?
Great question. I would say it's an ongoing process. I've maintained some relationships at NOBULL with people who were there when I was there. Some have left, some are not there anymore. And I've lost some relationships in the process. And that's painful. That's not easy to do. And NOBULL is coming up on their 10-year anniversary as a business this month, actually. And I'm excited for, that for them and for the people that have contributed to that company over a long period of time, despite the fact that our team is no longer there and we're much more connected with where we're going, the things that we're building now. But it's still cool, and I think being comfortable and present with how life evolves. And, I think recently I heard the quote that intelligence is measured by one's ability to change. And I hadn't heard that before, but I've thought about it quite a bit lately. And in that change has created new opportunity for me and those around me. And I hope it has for, folks that are at NOBULL, wherever, they are on their own path. And that will be ongoing, right? And I'm sure I'll experience that again in some other way in my career or in my life. And navigating it this time will serve me in the future as well. And really just trying to be present with today, and I think I've learned about myself through this experience over the last couple of years is that I'm really good at imagining the future, and I'm really good at reflecting on the past. And I need to be better about how I am today and how I feel about where things are today, and create space for that time. And family helps with that. Life, and time and maturity helps with that. And that's really how I have approached processing, leaving NOBULL, starting a new brand, having to rebuild and hold on to what worked and let go of what didn't. And I think that's just a part of life, personally and professionally. And that's where I'm at. And the sauna and the cold plunge help a lot with that.
Dude, they help so much with presence. I'm like you, man. There's a reason why I get into that little think tank about 4 or 5 days a week. And to echo the words of my mom before she passed, never be afraid to just start the fuck over. And you're not starting over fresh this time. You're starting over with experience. And, I know it's cliche, but the only permanence within life is impermanence. And sometimes when you're on that journey towards, whatever that destination is, not everybody is going to come with you the whole way. They might start with you. They might, stop at this overlook pass. They might go over here to camp, and, you're on your own journey. We're all kind of on our own unique journeys, and that doesn't make those experiences any less special. It just means that like not everybody's with you for the whole trek. And there's a maturity, there's a grief, there's a excitement about that because it creates space, but then there's also a sadness about it because you miss certain things. But that's part of maturing as a human being, and like you said, evolving that intelligence in the form of adaptability. So, man, it's always fun to chop it up with you, man. I really appreciate you carving out the time to chat with me today on ALLSMITH.
Likewise, and congrats on, all the progress you've made with standing this up. I've certainly been cheering from afar for the last couple of years, and I'm excited to see where you'll go with it, and hopefully it can come on again sometime down the road.
I appreciate it, man. It's a slow drip, but it's the game of long-term gratification and constantly learning and loving and sharing and collaborating as we go.
That's it.
Guys, if you enjoyed my conversation with the latest and greatest of all things World on Fire and While on Earth, check out Todd Meleney. Todd, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram. My Instagram's Industry Todd. Our new brand, While on Earth. The website is whileonearth.co. Performance footwear and apparel for wellness enthusiasts. And I hope you love it.
I love it, man. If you enjoyed my conversation today, guys, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Bryce.